What's going on, everybody? This is Jackson Fuller, and you are listening to the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. It is Tuesday, May 21st, about 1 o'clock p.m., so 24 hours till Arkansas baseball begins its journey in the SEC tournament, where after Dave Van Horn's press conference today, I believe he wants Arkansas to win that thing as much as I do. So we will analyze kind of what we heard from DVH, talk a little bit about the Texas A&M series from the past weekend, and a little bit of football talk as well today. We might even bust out a new segment that I have planned but haven't told Hutch about. So let's bring him in, play that rock music, and begin the latest episode of Hoggin the Mic. Hutch, how are you doing, man? Are you excited for postseason baseball now? Are you sad that the season's kind of, at any point now, I guess, starting next week, it can end in a moment? Just what are the emotions here as we turn the page away from the regular season?
Well, the postseason is the best time of the year, in my opinion. I love baseball; is probably my favorite sport to cover, and this is a tournament that Arkansas at least has a decent chance of winning every year. Talking the NCAA tournament, that is. SEC tournament, I'm not nearly as excited about. But hey, it's a necessary evil. They're going to go down there and play, at least a couple of games. They got the double elimination portion of the tournament. And then we get into the fun part, regionals, super regionals, and hopefully we get another trip to, and we, as in the media, get to make another trip to the College World Series because it's always a really fun event up there in Omaha. Easy trip, and should be a good time. I've been able to do it a few times, so hopefully, Jackson, you can experience it this year.
Hope so. That would be a real nice way to finish off what's been a terrific first season covering the Arkansas baseball team. And I feel like a nice little reward for all of us media members after the football and basketball seasons. But we'll talk a lot about the SEC tournament today. But first, I think a quick little recap here of the Texas A&M series. Arkansas lost the series, but they won the SEC West title down in College Station thanks to a 6-3 win on Friday night. Hudson White played hero there. That win was sandwiched in between two losses. They lost 1-0 in 11 innings on Thursday, and then just kind of ran out of gas Saturday. And really a meaningless game, a 14-4 loss in 7 innings. I guess, Hutch, the main story really from this past weekend against Texas A&M is just mission accomplished, right? I mean, we shouldn't really read too much into everything else that happened, although I know the sky was falling for a lot of Razorback fans Thursday night, after the series opener.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't look good when you had already burned, Hagen Smith and maybe Gackle as well, and you didn't win that game. But it was mission accomplished. There's been a few, as good as they've been the last few years, there's been some years where it's like, okay, going into last week and Arkansas needs to do this to either clinch an outright, by themselves SEC West title, or, clinch an outright SEC tournament or SEC regular season overall title. And they haven't done it. they've gone and they've lost 2 of 3 when they needed to win 2 of 3 or something like that. Luckily, they made it easy on themselves by only needing to win 1, but they did that. I think that should be celebrated if you're an Arkansas fan. You don't really get too many SEC West titles in football. And now, I mean, divisions are going away, but you don't really get to see that much, in basketball. Maybe, there was, some success there with Musselman and everything, but really over the last 2 decades, the baseball team has been your source of pride and everything. And so I think you celebrate when that stuff happens, even though at this point everyone's focused on, winning the overall national championship, which they are still trying to do.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame, honestly. Just not the lack of a celebration, but just kind of it's muted because of what you mentioned. The grand prize is really all that matters for this program right now, and that just Dave kind of talked about that, didn't he? I think it was after the Mississippi State series or something like that, or at the Swatters Club. Just like the price of having such a good program is these ridiculously high expectations where you win 43 games or however 40 games in the regular season, and a lot of your fan base is slightly disappointed with how things have gone. They deserved it. I think they over the course of the season they've been the best team in the SEC West. Because they lost what 3 series, but they didn't never they never went back to back with some struggles. They never got swept. They had an opportunity to win all 3 of those series that they lost. I think at the end of the day, I think a lot of people would say Texas A&M is the more talented team just because of the depth of that offense, and maybe that's the case. We'll find out probably in the next month or so, but I think Arkansas from start to finish was the best team in the division, and the record says that. Specifics of the games, I don't. It's been a little while. We don't need to get too much into it, but one thing that stuck out to me, and this is kind of a negative, is just gosh, it really feels like if Hagen Smith, the SEC tournament's one thing, but if Hagen Smith, he has to go undefeated in the postseason for Arkansas to win a national championship. And you saw it this weekend where they lose a game, and it just ever since Thursday night, it was when Thursday night ended and they lost, it just did not feel like Arkansas was winning that series. Could they steal a game? Yes, and they eventually did, but it really did not feel like they were going to come back and win the series. And that's something just scary to kind of put in the back of the mind when it comes to super regional, Omaha, the regionals. Like, I think if Hagen Smith loses any of his starts starting next week, Arkansas' season is going to end without a national championship.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to win whenever Hagen's on the mound, and you got to be careful kind of how you say it, because it's like Hagen didn't lose that game by any means. I mean, he went 6 scoreless with 14 strikeouts, something ridiculous like that. You got to help him out a little bit. That's where they've really struggled. Arkansas this year is there has been some really low scoring game ones. And now, of course, generally speaking, you're going up against the other team's best pitcher as well. But you've got to just give Hagen 3 runs of support. Just 3. I mean, that's all I ask, because that should be enough on most days for Arkansas to win with Hagen Smith on the mound, especially if you got Gabe Gackle closing it out. So I think that is of the utmost importance for sure. Although I will say, on a more positive side of things, how about Gage Wood? I mean, the outing he had. You found yourself another starter, it looks like. I mean, he's not Hagen Smith. He's not even peak Mason, Molina, Brady Tigert, which we'll get into those guys here in a minute. But he is a guy that can get you into games, and if the offense can do anything, even if you have to wait for a 3-run homer by Hudson White, you should be okay, because he's a guy that can work deeper in a game and has pitched okay of late. So I think that's a huge takeaway, especially if you can get one of those other 2 guys, whether it be Tigert, Molina, or even both of them, back on track and going. And then you're in a little bit better of a spot, gives you a little bit more wiggle room if something weird happens with Hagen. But really, it's important to win that Hagen start.
Yeah, 100%. I think you might even be underselling how good Gage Wood was against Texas A&M. I mean, he gave up the home run, right? But the runner that was on base was an unearned run. Like, it came off of an error. We didn't get to see it because it wasn't on TV. But I'll believe the stat broadcast actually logging an error for a defense, for an opposing team's defender. It must have been a pretty bad error for that to be the case. Sorry, rant over there. But to give up only 2 earned runs in 5 innings against arguably the best offense in the country, definitely one of the top 5 offenses in the country. I think Gage Wood has locked himself down as that second guy in the rotation just because of what you said. Like, yeah, maybe Mason Molina has the higher ceiling where he could maybe throw 6 shutout innings against the best offense, and maybe Gage Wood couldn't. But the floor for Gage Wood feels significantly higher than Mason Molina right now. And I think that's really in a game 2 scenario where if you do hopefully get that win and Hagen Smith start, a guy that can get you to the 6th inning with the chance is a huge value. I don't have too much else to say about Texas A&M, Hutch, unless you've got any big thoughts. I think really good to see Hudson White and Vahiva Aloy get going, and we still need to see it with Kendall Diggs and Will McIntyre. I mean, I think for me, those are the 2 biggest issues with the team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys got to get going. I was really kind of hoping that McIntyre would maybe experience something similar to, Molina coming out of the bullpen, throwing 3 shutout. I was thinking, well, maybe it'll be the same way, just in the reverse. A reliever coming to a starting position, and it just didn't play out that way. It was unfortunate, especially given the fact that he walked in the winning run in the 11th inning of game one. You got to get him going again, even if he's not peak Will McIntyre from earlier in the season where he's got a sub-2 ERA. You need him to at least be able to give you some innings, and it just hasn't been there lately. So, going to be really interesting. I think we're going to talk about the SEC tournament here in a little bit, but that's one major thing I think they've got to hopefully get back on track is Will McIntyre and of course Kendall Diggs as well. But I'm just I don't know. I don't know if Diggs is healthy or what's going on there, if it's more mental at this point. But yeah, they've got to get those guys going for sure because they are just such vitally important pieces to this team.
Yeah, we'll dive into both of those guys in a little bit, Hutch. But let's quick run through the SEC tournament. It got underway earlier today. LSU beat Georgia, so we're recording this. I guess Alabama South Carolina game's probably already started or just about to. So we don't know Arkansas's opponent. You'll probably listen to this knowing the opponent, but it'll be either Alabama or South Carolina. And Dave Van Horn announced earlier today that Ben Bybee would be the starting pitcher on Thursday. I think that's an interesting decision. What do you think that says not only about Ben, but maybe about Brady Tygart, Mason Molina, and the rest of the pitching staff that he's going with Bybee in game one?
To me, it tells me that they don't feel good enough about Brady Tygart because I feel like in an ideal world, if he just needed a weekend off and was going to be good to go, then boom, you got Brady Tygart ready to go in this first game. Be perfect. He's well rested and everything. But to me, I don't know anything. This is just kind of me speculating. Like, is he? He keeps insisting like he's healthy, but it just makes me wonder. Given his history and everything, is everything 100% there? Hopefully, they can get him on the mound at some point in the SEC tournament, so that way it's really meaningless innings opposed to in the regional. But you need that guy to give you something, even if he only closes one game, gives you 2 innings or something like that, then that's at least something. With Mason Molina, I wasn't really too surprised with that, because he did pitch. I guess it was in the Friday game. So it would have been pretty short rest, even though he did only throw 3 innings. I figure he's probably going to be waiting in the wings. Maybe if they win one of these first 2 games and get another one, I bet he would be the next. Gage Wood's there too, so they'll kind of play it by ear. If they get behind, Gage Wood goes out there, maybe struggles, or like they are down, and they're like, well, we're going to throw Molina, whatever, just to get them some innings out of the bullpen. But I feel like it sets up nicely. I mean, if no one ever really wants to see Arkansas make a run, they won it all in 21 and they didn't make it to Omaha. But if they were to make a run, it would set up nicely, especially if Tygart is healthy. But I mean, you could go Bybee in game 1, Hagen Smith in game 2, Gage Wood, and then Mason Molina. Boom, you've got 4 starters right there. I believe that the way the bracket sets up, that would get you through to the SEC championship. So it would set up nicely. But yeah, they gotta. I'm a little bit concerned about Brady Tygart. Long story short, is I'm a little bit concerned. I'm anxious to see kind of how they use and what he looks like when he gets out there.
I share that concern. I made the joke in the opening of this podcast about how much Dave Van Horn cares about winning the SEC tournament, and I know you guys have kind of shed some light on that with me, through the year. Just like it's not really ever been a priority, especially when Arkansas is like a locked-in national seed and going to host regional, super regional. Like, why make it a priority? Save the guys, and that all makes sense. But man, I mean, his quotes today, it just seems like what did he say? You want to win because you're playing a game, and it's like, yeah, I guess that's true, but that's also that's not saying much about the SEC tournament. That it's just another game, and that's perfectly fine. The way I read it, I mean, he didn't even commit to starting Smith today. I mean, he probably will, but he doesn't today. He didn't say he's starting Thursday. He said, I still don't know how we'll use him. That made me think maybe they're going to bring him out of the bullpen at some point this weekend just to give him like some experience doing that. I know he has all the experience from his sophomore year doing that, but he hasn't done it in a while. They might have to do that in a regional, or in Omaha. Like, maybe it's worth giving him one outing out of the bullpen just so he gets in that routine. I don't know. That might be a huge stretch on my part, but it just felt weird not, committing to Smith, not starting Tygart today. It felt like this is going to be one of those weekends where the Arkansas is going to be really happy if they win, and they're really not going to be they're not going to be upset at all, if they lose and they get to save some guys.
Yeah, that's Dave Van Horn for you. And that's not a bad thing. He's exactly right. No, even when they won the whole thing in 21, they had the injury to Brady Slavens in the SEC tournament, and that was just a massive injury, on that team that was number one, favorite to win it all, and they don't even make it out of the super regionals. So it to me, and to pretty much, Dave Van Horn, essentially, like, the risk outweighs the reward, especially as you said, if you're already locked into your situation, then it's tough. I mean, if you're like, in the first game today, LSU and Georgia, both those teams had something to play for. LSU is just trying to make sure they 100% lock themselves into the NCAA tournament, and Georgia's trying to play themselves into a top 8 national seed, opposed to just being a regional host. So there's things to play for in certain situations, but more times than not, especially lately, as good as Arkansas has been in the regular season, really not much to play for. So I don't blame Dave Van Horn. It'll be interesting to see kind of how he handles it. I still personally think Hoggin Smith will start a game. I think he'll start that Thursday game, but I doubt he'll go 100 pitches like we've seen him. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they cut him off at 80 or 85, just to be sure. Make sure you get him out of there and get him healthy for the following week when the games are really important.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to start. I was just throwing out a conspiracy theory, trying to unnecessarily read too deep into Dave Van Horn's quotes. But I wouldn't be surprised though if Hoggin doesn't get the ball Thursday and they just on Friday, and it's like, hey, we're going to keep you on the routine, right? You're going to be starting. Well, maybe he won't be starting Friday of the regional. That's a conversation for next week's podcast of who does Arkansas start in game one. I think it's a very interesting conversation. But Hutch, let's. I got a new segment. It's called Hutch Rants. I know you messaged me that you wanted to do some rants tonight. Let's start with, you brought up the Brady Slavens injury. Just how about the double base at the SEC tournament? Just what does this mean for Arkansas? Do you wish we had a time machine and we could bring this double base back to that that Brady Slavens era? Just kind of what do you think about them having the double base at first?
I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, Dave Van Horn apparently thinks the same way. I mean, based on what he told us, and I think he was genuine in that. He's been pretty open about, rules that he likes and doesn't like. Like, he doesn't like the international tiebreaker rule where the guy starts on second in extra innings. Does not like that rule, but it sounds like the double base rule he really likes. I like it. It's a no-brainer. It kind of makes things a little bit easier when it comes like the interference call, like when a guy's running inside the base path or whatever. Makes it a little bit easier on the umpires, which you always want to make their jobs a little bit easier. You don't want them unnecessarily confused. And it prevents injuries. That Brady Slavens injury, people may forget about that. That was a massive, massive injury. Brady Slavens was a guy that hit like 300 up until that point. He was hitting 300 in addition to all that power he has. People always remember Brady because he was here for 3 years. People remember him for being a big swing and miss, high strikeout, low batting average. But that first year he was here, he also hit for average and was really, really good. And if you think back to the game they lost against North Carolina State in the Super Regional, I think he went 0 for 4. Maybe if he doesn't get hurt, maybe he can go 2 for 4 and one of those 2 hits be a home run or something. And boom, you're suddenly looking at Arkansas winning that game and Kevin Kopp's pitching in the College World Series, and you got to feel good about that situation. So it's just a shame that didn't exist back then and there's no guarantee that it would have prevented the injury. It could have still happened, but it would be unlikely. I think Brady Slavens even responded to that tweet from the SEC announcing the rule, like was something like, I can't remember what it was, but it was a GIF or something. And you could tell he was like, man, I wish this was around back then. It would have been just you could have changed the whole thing. One of those little things that if the butterfly effect of it, who knows how it could have gone down, especially since North Carolina State looked like a team that was going to win it all that year had the COVID situation not happened. So really unfortunate, but man, hopefully this thing gets implemented. Scrolling through the replies on Twitter to the SEC announcement of that was hilarious. People were just absolutely losing their minds, and I'm like, why? What this is less of a change than the pitch clock, and the pitch clock's been great, I feel like. So It's just people don't like change, especially change to a sport like baseball that's been around for over 100 years.
Yeah, I mean it's a change, but it doesn't really change anything, right? Like it changes so little. Yeah, it's if it's making the players safer, it's a good rule. It's a good thing to implement, and I think that was kind of the bottom line of Van Horn's point today on that note. Uh, yeah, so I guess so, Hutch. I have three questions that I think are the three most important questions for Arkansas down the stretch here before the regionals, and I guess we can go through these questions and it'll kind of help us preview a little bit the SEC tournament, but also just kind of the entire rest of the playoffs and their postseason. And the first question I think is obvious: who is the third starter? In the weekend rotation. I think we both agree it's Hagen Smith and Gage Wood. I would lean Mason Molina. I still trust him more than Ben Bybee. Like I know he's going to throw walks, but I think Ben Bybee's going to get hit hard. Between the two of them, I would rather roll out with Molina. Who do you think? Sunday of the regional. Who's the third guy that Van Horn's going to go to?
I think it's Mason Molina. 100%. I think he's too good. He's a guy that's got to throw. He's got to be able to work around his walks. You can't go out there and be like the South Carolina game where he walks 7 dudes in 3 innings or whatever it was. He's got to be better than that, but his stuff is good. People don't hit it hard. And I think it's a good combination when you're in a game 3 of a regional. You could win and advance, or you win or go home. That's a spot where you want a guy, especially a veteran guy like that, who's been an ace of a staff at Texas Tech, in the Big 12. He's pitched on the big stage before. Yeah, that's who you got to go with. I think Ben Bybee has potential. I think he could be good, really good next year. But this year, as you said, like he throws strikes. I think that's what Dave likes about him, is that he doesn't walk a lot of people. But sometimes his strikes are so good that the other team hits them and hits them really hard. So I think it's an obvious choice. You got to go with Mason Molina as that third starter. But Dave could be like, hey, we're just going to take it game by game. And if we need him to close out a game, then so be it. But I feel like the bullpen's deep enough that they don't necessarily need him in the bullpen right now. I think he's too valuable as a starter.
Big chance for Bybee tomorrow. If he goes out there and throws 4 good innings, I think it becomes more of a conversation, especially if then Molina shows up later in this tournament out of the bullpen and does well. But I agree. I think it's Molina's the guy. Okay, question number 2, and I'll allow you right now. Just go ahead, pull up the Arkansas baseball stats or roster if you want. Just something, and I can give my answers first for this one. So if you want a little time to prepare, I'm really catching you off guard here. But what is the bullpen pecking order? Is question number 2. The top, I'm going to say, let's just go the top 5 arms in the bullpen of who Van Horn, and this is like, if everyone's available, high leverage situation, these are the power rankings kind of for Arkansas's bullpen. Mine will go, 1 is Gabe Yackel. I think it's an obvious choice. I think 2 is also an obvious choice right now, and that's Christian Fauch. I think 3, and this is not an obvious choice by any means. I can't imagine saying this even 2 weeks ago, but I would say 3 is Parker Coyle. And then I would say 4 is Cooper Dossett if he's healthy, because that injury did not look good against Texas A&M, but Van Horn said that it doesn't look like he needs surgery. I don't know whether that means he's done for the year, still not needing surgery. There's not much left to play, or if that's he could probably pitch in a regional. Van Horn said it's a good assumption he won't pitch in the SEC tournament. But anyway, I've got Dossett 4, and then I guess I've got Will McIntyre 5 after that. But I think you could convince me pretty easily that should be, Stone Hewlett or Jake Faraday even. I think maybe I would put Jake Faraday 4, Cooper Dossett 5, and then McIntyre and Hewlett kind of knocking on the door then. But I think the bigger point in that ranking is how far down McIntyre is. What do your bullpen power rankings look like, Hutch?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in line with you. I think you may be a little bit higher on Dossett than I am, which, Dossett went to Springdale Harbor. That's my alma mater's arch rival as a Springdale High grad. So this is not me giving any type of bias. I kind of it's kind of cool seeing a guy from my hometown, pitch for the Razorbacks. But uh, he's looked really good in some instances, but it still seems like his opportunities have been few and far between. And so that's why I still think they'd probably had. I feel like they would trust McIntyre more than Dossett. So even if he's healthy, still, I don't know if it's a earned trust necessarily. I think it's just a matter of, hey, he's the veteran guy, he's been here, and you just kind of got to hope like, hey, eventually he's gonna figure it out. He's gonna get it back on track. What we've been saying that for a couple of weeks now, and it hasn't quite happened. There's been some good moments here and there, but not nearly as consistent as it was before. So I would probably have McIntyre right there, maybe just ahead of Jake Flaherty. But I do think Parker Coyle's probably surpassed McIntyre definitely in the pecking order, which, as you said, is crazy to think. But he was a guy that before the season they were really high on. They thought that he could be a guy that takes that next step and as a sophomore and is really, really good for them. So I think it's warranted to have him ahead of McIntyre right now. So, and plus he's a lefty, so it gives you another lefty out of the bullpen. So I think that's probably what I would go with, just like you. I mean, Gackle, Fouch. I'm going to get the list pulled up here again. Probably Coyle. And then I'd go McIntyre. And then Hewlett. Hewlett's just so hard to place because he's such a situational guy. I would like it if they gave him some run, although I think he struggled against A&M, if my memory serves me correctly. So I'm not sure. It's interesting. The good news is they've got options. If one of them isn't working, they can go to the next one and try again the next day with the guy who struggled. So, but yeah, I think McIntyre is definitely kind of fallen on the pecking order after midway through the season. He was probably number one in that order.
Yeah. I think also maybe we looked at it a little bit differently in the sense that and there's no wrong way, but I was kind of thinking more for just one inning, and I think that's kind of where maybe I lean to Dossett, where I trust him more right now to get one inning of work done. I mean, he's pitched 14 times this year and he's given up a run in 4 of those games, now hasn't pitched a whole lot in the SEC, but he has, 3 straight weekends or 3 of the last 4 weekends, mixed results. But yeah, it's just kind of tough where after those first 2 now, there are some question marks with whoever you run out there. And that applies to McIntyre as well. Okay, the final question number 3, what should the starting outfield be? And I mean, I think it's just crazy to me that we don't have an obvious answer for this yet, because we had a Jason Jones sighting last week, or for 2 weeks now. But what do you think? Who's the starting outfield for Arkansas in the regional?
Oh man, if Hagen Smith is on the mound, I'm thinking kind of like Dave Van Horn. If Hagen Smith is on the mound, I want Ty Wilmsmeyer in center. He also showed some life, in the A&M series, put the ball in play and reached on some. I think he reached on a bunt single, maybe an infield single. So, I like him in center. And then, of course, that gives you the opportunity to move Holt around. And I would say I still think you got to leave Diggs in right and put Holt in left, just because Diggs, for this team to do what they want to do, I feel like Diggs is going to have to be a part of it. He's going to have to get hot and get going. He has a track record of success, and you probably can't say that about Jason Jones. Had some great moments. He had a big home run against Mississippi State. And I think if he had been playing consistently and gotten, more, playing time throughout the year, maybe it's a different story. Maybe he's done enough to where it's like, okay, well, we got to stick with him. He's got the power. But to me, I think you got to go with Holton left, Wilmsmeyer in center, and Diggs in right. Now, if anyone else is on if someone else is starting other than Hagen Smith, where you're actually going to have to score a decent amount of runs, then I lean toward putting Holt in center and Jones in left, and keeping Diggs in right and taking Wilmsmeyer out of the lineup. I think that's what I would do, and I think that's what Dave is going to do moving forward. But who the heck knows?
Yeah, I'm right there on the same page. I would maybe even consider leaving it Wilmsmeyer in center and Holton left and Diggs in right, just because look, I mean, Jason Jones had a huge hit. The home run against Mississippi State was massive. Just turned the game around. He got the rally started. They don't win that series without Jason Jones. But I mean, against Texas A&M last week, he went 1 for 8 and he struck out 7 times. I mean, and that's just kind of what we've seen from him this year. So, like, is Ty Wilmsmeyer really a worse offensive threat than that? I mean, yeah, he was in a huge slump, but I think Ty Wilmsmeyer's plus defense, what that does for the outfield, and even his base running ability, he at least he'll walk more than Jason Jones, and I think that I would go Wilmsmeyer in center, Holton left, and Diggs in right, and I would keep starting Diggs, but I'll say this, Hutch, I don't want Diggs near the leadoff spot. It hasn't worked. I don't think he's had really a great game up there since he's been slumping. Like I think he had a couple maybe good games in the leadoff spot at the beginning of the year when Stovall was out, but look, he's coming up to bat with runners on base no matter where you put him. That's just the baseball's a funny thing kind of right now. Like it doesn't matter what DVH does. Kendall Diggs is up to bat with runners on first and second and 2 outs. He can't be at the top of the lineup getting the most at bats of the game. That's got to be Peyton Stovall to me. He's your best hitter. Put him at leadoff and let him get 5 at bats every game, and make sure he's getting one more at bat than Kendall Diggs is.
Yeah, plus it seems like Stovall, since they kind of tried to move him down in the order to give him some more RBI opportunities, it seems like he hasn't hit the ball as well as he was. So I don't know why that is. I think that's just, as you said, baseball's a funny thing. I would do that. I would move Diggs down in the order. I don't mind Holt being up there. I mean, maybe put Holt in the leadoff spot. I don't think he's done a ton in that leadoff spot, but I think that's more just a coincidence than anything. I like it. I like the energy that he brings there. So I would personally, I was a little bit surprised when I saw, Diggs leading off and Peyton Holt down like the 8 hole or something. Like I might flip those guys.
I'm definitely flipping them, and I'm putting Hudson White batting 5th when there's that's the best spot to you get 4 guys, hopefully 4 good hitters in front of you to get on base. If 2 of those guys get on in the first inning, you're coming up to bat with 2 runners on. Hudson White's been the best RBI guy. I put him 5. I put Stovall back at the top, and I put Diggs down at 8, 7. I probably don't put him right behind Hudson White because Hudson's hitting so good. I want someone with a little bit hotter bat, behind him, and maybe that remains Ryder Helfrich. That's kind of what they did against A&M, I think, or they might have flipped those 2 occasionally as well. So, but yeah, it's I think you're right. They got to keep starting Kendall Diggs, but I think it's foolish to expect him to all of a sudden become a 350 hitter, this postseason. I think you hope he comes up clutch when the moment is at its biggest this year, because you don't have any other guys that you trust more than him waiting to replace him. But he can't be kind of the guy that you're depending on to carry the offense for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he gets hot in the SEC tournament. Maybe he gets going and they're like, okay, well, now we've seen enough. And then I would be more comfortable moving him up. But I've got to see it before I do it. I can't just do it blindly, which I think Dave Van Horn's done. And I'm not trying to criticize Dave Van Horn at all. I mean, he knows way more than I do. But me personally, I would want to see him produce before I move him up in that order. But, beyond that, 7 or 8 hole.
Yeah, neither of us are. I'm not insinuating that my decisions would immediately make Arkansas better. I think this is just what I would do and what you would do, and based off of kind of what we've seen. And right now, this offense needs more than decisions from Jackson and Hutch to turn around. They got to just kind of find themselves here down the stretch of this season. So. That's enough, I think, for baseball talk, Hutch. Surprisingly, no basketball commits this week. Everyone's still kind of waiting on Kentucky's transfer DJ Wagner to pop into the Calipari class. He was on a visit to Fayetteville, I believe, last weekend during the Mississippi State series. Just hasn't committed. It's kind of been quiet on that, but I think he's still expected to be in the class. It's kind of unclear who else is recruiting him right now. But until he's in, you can't assume crazier things have happened in college recruiting. So still the same roster we discussed last week. The football team did make an addition. They picked up a wide receiver, Zachary Taylor, a former Army commit. I think he's the 13th now scholarship wide receiver on the team. it's just the wide receiver class this year could have been a lot better than it ended up being. Hutch, what do you think of this commitment and this overall state of Arkansas recruiting right now in the football landscape?
I mean, this guy could end up being good, but he's definitely more of a developmental type of guy. I mean, he was going to Army for a reason. He's the guy that, as I've looked more into it, he played last year at a 3A school in Texas, a school that should be familiar to Arkansas fans because Arkansas got a offensive lineman from that school, Yoakum, a few years back in the Chad Morris era. It interesting there. He was at a 6A school before that, but he was at a 6A school like in Southwest Texas, and they didn't really win a lot, and so it's kind of hard to know kind of what he's going to do. But I mean, he does have speed. Ran track, was state champion sprinter. Seems to have speed. He's 6'4", which is good, but he's 170 pounds, so he's very, very skinny. Probably could use an off season or two in the college weight program. And if he does that, and if he bulks up and can maintain that speed, then maybe he develops into a player there. But I would not hold my breath on him contributing right away as a freshman. Could come in and surprise us all, but again, I'm not holding my breath. But it is an interesting ad. You're stealing a commitment from Army. They've already stolen a commitment from Louisiana Lafayette in Cross Johnson. That was a late ad. They stole a transfer from Charlotte in the South Florida transfer. Coffrey Brown, I don't know how you say his first name, but he was going to Charlotte. Yeah, you want to be stealing your recruits from other Power 5 programs, or at least high profile Group of Fives or something. But they've stolen them from Army, Louisiana Lafayette, and Charlotte. Not exactly awe-inspiring. And then the other guys they brought in this year are C.J. Brown, who, to their credit, seems to be a really good player and might actually contribute as a freshman. I was very impressed by him. Coaching staff was also impressed by him because they even Sam Pittman admitted they were a little bit surprised by what he did this spring. And then the other one's Jordan Anthony. We've talked about him a lot, the transfer from Texas A&M. Super, super fast. Sometimes struggles with catching the ball, which is a little bit important as a wide receiver. So we'll see if he can maybe figure all that out and put it together. But third school in 3 years. Bobby Petrino clearly liked him, brought him from Texas A&M, but still not a awe-inspiring class, especially when previously, you don't like to talk about the guys that got away, but you had Courtney Crutchfield and Ashton Bethel-Roman, 2 high-caliber 4-star recruits committed, and only to see them end up at Missouri and Texas A&M. So you replace those guys with the guys I just mentioned, it's hard to be a little bit discouraged by that.
Yeah. I have nothing more really to add about the state of the football program there. It's just, you talk about the teams that they're beating for recruits right now. It's I think that they've got some pretty good evaluators on staff. Petrino's shown a knack for being able to develop and evaluate guys. I think Travis Williams has kind of done the same over his career, and the guys that he's brought in through the transfer portal on the defensive side have usually produced. Again, you're getting an Army wide receiver is, there's no expectations of him playing this year or even next year, really. I think that he would be a really long developmental guy. What I will say, though, is as far as the wide receiver position goes, I think they're in a good spot this year. I'm excited to see Tyrone Broden and Andrew Armstrong. I think they can be a very productive SEC group, and you're always one transfer away. So, look, if Sam does what he intends to do and has a bounce back year with the Bobby Petrino offense and the stats go up and a lot of guys have good years, Arkansas will all of a sudden be a more attractive place for recruits, either high school or the transfer portal. But you got to go do it on the field this year. I think the winning games on the field in 2024 is the key for the recruiting, for the fan buy-in, for a lot of things. They have to improve on the field this year. So I don't know. You have any follow-up thoughts on that, Hutch, or did I just I covered everything, didn't I?
Just win, baby. That's the key. Just win.
Exactly. Real quick, Hutch, what do you think what's the one thing that you're going to be most watching this week at the SEC tournament for the baseball team? Is there one particular, storyline, a player that you think is just a key thing for fans to maybe pay attention to before the real high stakes arrive in the regionals?
Well, first, I was really, really hoping that Georgia would beat LSU and then our potentially set up an Arkansas and Georgia matchup on, I guess it would have been Thursday, because then we could have potentially seen Hagen Smith versus Charlie Condone. That would have been really cool. Would have been really fun. Alas, not going to happen. Maybe we get to see it. I mean, I guess technically it could happen in a super regional, but I don't think the seeding would match up. Probably Omaha if it happens at all. So that's one thing that's already out the window. But focusing it more on Arkansas, I really think it's all, to me, it's Will McIntyre. I still strongly believe he is a vital piece to this team winning a national championship, even maybe more so than Kendall Diggs, just because of how valuable he can be out of the bullpen, a guy that can pitch multiple times when he's on. And that, to me, is what they've got to get figured out. They've got to get him back on track to where he is a key part of that bullpen, because he really deepens that bullpen when he's on. So that's the number one thing I'm watching to see how he does, and maybe kind of how they use him if they try to throw him into another high leverage spot, because it's like, hey, it's the SEC tournament, doesn't matter. Let's see what he can do, under pressure. Or do they only wait until it's a game that's already out of hand one way or the other, and kind of see like, okay, well, now there's no pressure. Let's see if he can get going in that. I'm anxious to see kind of how they go about deploying him down there in Hoover.
Yep, I think that's a great pick. I'm just going to go. I want to see two bats get hot this weekend and join Hudson White, whether that's because even Stovall is not hitting as great, as he was a couple weeks ago. Vahiva Loy had a good weekend, but he was not, he was kind of slumping just a little bit before Texas A&M. Get two bats going alongside Hudson White, whether that's Vahiva, McLaughlin, Stovall, Diggs, Holt, Wilmsmeyer, Jason Jones reappearance. Whoever, just get two more bats, get three, a third of the lineup, feeling really good heading to the regionals. I think this team's still in a great spot to win a regional just because of the pitching depth, but it would be nice to see the bats have some momentum heading into that weekend. So I'll be headed to Hoover in a couple hours. Hutch, I'm bummed you won't be there to join, but you'll be there in spirit, and we will see each other very soon next week for the Fayetteville Regional, and we will have next time we talk, we'll have some opponents and a deep NCAA tournament to kind of preview and talk about. So thank you, as always, Hutch, for joining me. Thank you guys so much for listening to Hoggin the Mic. We will talk to you next Monday.